Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friday Apocryphal Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything Friday Apocryphal and podcast. And boy, do we have a show for you today. Today we are covering Judith, chapters 1 through 3. And Judith is, it's like Tobit. It's like a book.
It's a nice little story. It's not actually a nice little story. It's apparently a very brutal story, more brutal than you would imagine.
Yeah, why are you starting it with "it's a nice little story"?
Yeah,
really
that's
give them a misconception.
It's a nice little brutal story.
I love nice little brutal stories.
So far as like Nightmare on Elm Street is a nice little story.
I mean, I'd say so.
Sure
it is a nice little story.
Okay.
This book doesn't even mention Judith until like chapter 8, by the way.
Great.
So until then, we're going to be getting some context.
Wonderful.
Half the book is the context for the other half of the book. So this book, lots of interesting ideas about it. So
wow. Well, what version of the book do you have?
Oh, well, you know what? The version that I have is Judith, a new translation with introduction and commentary from Carrie A. Moore. And I think Carrie Moore was the same one that wrote the commentary from Anchor Bible on, was it Ben Sira? One of the other books that we have from that commentary series.
Might be Ben Sira. I do recognize the name.
Yeah. Maybe it was a different one.
But Anchor Bible, very good.
I think it was Ben Sira. I recognize
Maybe it was
the sort of bad art drawing on the front.
Those are all the same. It's always bad art on the front.
Yeah, but this specific type of bad art.
I don't think they draw the draw. I don't think they draw the cover.
Drawn. It was
probably
drawn.
was
No.
not
I mean,
Carrie A. Moore
yeah.
who drew it.
I'm saying that it wasn't Carrie A. Moore who drew it.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know why you'd compare the artwork.
Of
Yeah.
the books.
Look at the
It's
artwork.
publication.
Look at the artwork on the cover of this book.
This is from the Anchor Bible. They always have horrible artwork on the books.
But decent commentary.
Yeah.
I remember Ben Sira having also terrible art on the cover.
Absolutely. It was just his a face of
Really bad
Jewish
face.
guy.
Yeah, he was just malformed looking. Wasn't good.
Yeah, it was very poorly drawn.
But in addition to that, we have Eerdman's commentary on the Bible and the New Interpreter's Bible commentary, volume 6.
Yeah. So we got lots of a decent amount of commentaries for this.
Yes, we do.
So
Hear
let's
that, guys? Next Sunday we're gonna have Matthew's birthday stream.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Hype.
And,
Matthew's birthday stream.
and the ash is improved there. So
That's good.
That's good.
That's
We're
definitely
glad you're capable of breathing.
Yeah. Oof. So tell us about the book.
Okay.
Judith.
Great. So I mean, the story itself, we're gonna get into it, but it takes place during the time of Nebuchadnezzzer, of course, as you can tell from the title. So we're kind of in that, time period. We've been here before, right? We've talked about Nebuchadnezzar before. I don't know if we've talked about people like Holofernes, or other ones, but I've definitely read about them in other books on ancient Near Eastern history. So on the historicity of the book, let's talk about that.
Let's talk.
So in a similar vein to a book like Esther, this it could go either way, but the thing is, this is written a lot like history was written in the ancient world.
Yes.
So it has a lot of dates that I have pulled up here. So like the 12th year of Nebuchadnezzar, in Nebuchadnezzar's 17th year, and it has exact periods of time as well. So feasted for 4 whole months, and they're talking about, doing things for a whole month, blockaded them for 30 days, hold out for 5 more days. Just lots of those, lots of things denoting periods of time, which is very common of the history of how histories are written. Like think back to the Deuteronomistic history. Mm-hmm. Think back to how many dates were in those texts.
I don't want to.
Yes, do it.
And Ezekiel.
It hurts.
Yeah, Ezekiel as well.
Yeah.
So this also mentions a lot of very real places. Like, for example, Nineveh. We've run across that 100 times. Ecbatana was later it was the capital of the Persian Empire, but it was also I think it was a pretty big city beforehand as well. Let's see. Yeah, there's Damascus, Jerusalem, classic cities, Memphis, and then there are plenty of other locations, some of which are yet unknown, but that's the same thing for the Bible. We also have maps in this.
Oh, cool! Let them see the.
Which map? We got quite a bit. We got
the most relevant maps.
I suppose this one. Here's a map of Palestine. You're probably not even going to be able to read all the wording, but it starts off...
Move it up to the camera harder.
I'm not going to move it up to the camera harder. You should just zoom in harder.
Okay.
That's the map. That's what you're getting from me.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, either way, we have this map. If we need to reference it, if we don't know where something is, or like a direction someone's taking, we can go back to that. So either way, here's some evidence against the historicity of this book. Just starting off here.
All right.
So he goes over some of the stuff that would fit in well with history, like it makes some fairly specific historical claims, but honestly, like a lot of them, like I was reading through them, they can just be hyperbolic. Like the phrasing of them is like, okay, they can just be exaggerating like a little bit. Like this doesn't have to be like literal. Like if someone said, for example, yet there was no one who spoke ill of her. Like even if there was like one person who spoke ill of her, and you could say, look, it's not true. It's like, well, yeah, obviously, but that's like hyperbolic.
Yeah.
So like stuff like that really doesn't speak, one way or the other. I don't even know why they mentioned it. However,
hyperbole.
Yeah. However, since Martin Luther, who viewed Judith as a poem and an allegorical passion play, scholars have noted the book's shocking carelessness with well-established historical and geographical facts. As early as 1689, Capellus delivered a scathing evaluation of Judith. Quote, "A most silly fable, invented by a most inept, injudicious, impudent, and clownish Hellenist."
Wow.
I love that.
Clownish Hellenist.
Yeah. Oddly enough, although as early as the 5th century AD, a few writers had reservations about the authenticity of Judith's Nebuchadnezzar. The church fathers did not question the book's essential historical character. The very first verse of chapter 1 contains two of the most egregious blunders in the entire book. Very first verse. Quote, "It was the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled over the Assyrians from his capital, Nineveh, that Arphaxad was ruling over the Medes from Ecbatana. But as any student of the Bible knows, Nebuchadnezzar was king of the Babylonians, not the Assyrians, and most students of Old Testament history know that Nineveh was destroyed in 612 BC, 7 or 8 years prior to Nebuchadnezzar's becoming king. Moreover, according to Jeremiah 32:1, the 12th year of Nebuchadnezzar would have been the 4th year of the reign of Zedekiah. Judith's last king in the pre-exilic period, however, elsewhere in Judith, the setting for the events of the story is placed in the post-exilic period. So that's interesting. Finally, neither secular nor biblical history knows of any Median king named Arphaxad. To be sure, Ecbatana was a great city, just as the book affirms, but the city was actually, quote, conquered in 554 by Cyrus the Great. Yeah, and that's where Cyrus would reside. So yeah, there are definitely historical blunders. We already kind of talked about the time period this is taking place in. But yeah, when you try to get into specifics, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. One of the things I found interesting when reading through this commentary was the amount of different ideas there were about, like, they're trying to account for all the historical inaccuracies while trying to maintain that it was still a historical book. none of them were really all that great. So like, I didn't really matter. So after talking about some of the structural things, they go into, or Carrie Moore goes into some of the religious values of the book, and this can actually help us determine like the authorship, as far as, not like a person or anything, but maybe what community this person was from. So I am currently trying to find the page where they get into that.
They have a bit on it in here too. I'll get into it once you finish your excursus.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to find the part where they go into it, but I have lost some of these places.
Trying to find one page among many.
Yeah. What I do want to point out, however, is I think that the book was initially written in Palestine. I think that's what I remember them saying.
Yeah, Eerdmans points out here that the story may originally have been written in Hebrew, though there's no manuscript evidence for this. The book we have has been transmitted in 3 slightly different Greek versions, 2 Latin versions, and a Syriac version. In addition, versions of the story have circulated in Aramaic and Hebrew. The Book of Judith was well known in the early Christian church, where Judith was praised for her chastity and was presented as evidence that women empowered by God's grace have performed deeds worthy of men. The story was very popular in medieval art, poems, and dramas. Judith even appeared as the Queen of Hearts on playing cards.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So here's the part that I was looking for. So various lines of evidence suggest that the author of Judith was a Palestinian Jew, probably an early Pharisee. First, the central events of the story take place in Palestine itself, where the author evidences a more accurate and precise knowledge of geography than he does of his geography outside of Palestine. Second, the vorlage of the Greek Judith was unquestionably Hebrew. And this writer knows of no linguistic evidence that indicates that the story originally was in either Aramaic or Greek. Apparently, there are some scholars that maintain different views on that. So the view of Hans J. Oh, man, this is a difficult one to say. Pribach, who maintains that Judith's identification of Nebuchadnezzar as the king of the Assyrians, whose residence was at Nineveh and who crossed the Hydaspes, is proof that the author of Judith used Eupolemus, a Jewish Hellenistic scholar of the Hasmonean period. That's his view, apparently, but it does not constitute a contradiction to the preceding statement. Finally, the book's religious ideas are Palestinian and Pharisaic in character, with no traces of Alexandrian or Sadducean influence.
Well, the author of this commentary, Lawrence M. Wills, it's another Lawrence.
Great.
Wow.
Is it spelled the way my name is spelled?
It's Lawrence.
No, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
It's a fake Lawrence.
Stupid Lawrences.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how to spell Lawrence correctly. Jeez.
Now, Wills, it's a bit odd because it's M. Wills, so I want to say Mills, but Wills points out that there are no precisely datable Greek terms or ideas, but several motifs: the wearing of garlands and olive wreaths, the worship of a king as God, and some people reclining instead of sitting at a table could have entered in any time after 332 BCE. Some of the most convincing datable motifs arise in connection with the Hasmoneans, the dynastic name of the Maccabees, who achieved independence from the Greeks in 165 BCE, the high priest as political and military leader, the ascendancy of the Jerusalem Council, and the close similarity between the exhibiting of Holofernes' head and the exhibiting of the head of Nicanor after he had been defeated by Judah the Maccabee, all speak for a date after the Maccabean revolt. Even more important for consideration,
The ideals expressed in Judith correspond closely to the ideals of the later Hasmonean rulers, especially John Hyrcanus I, 135 to 104 BCE, and Alexander Jannaeus, 103 to 78 BCE. Hyrcanus in 107 BCE annexed Samaria, the provincial designation of the northern half of the Old Kingdom of Israel. He thus realized the Hasmonean dream of reestablishing the approximate borders of David's and Solomon's united Israel. A dating of the book in this period would even provide a possible origin of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians. Assyria, in biblical prophecies, was often read as Syria in the literature of this period. Thus, Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, could have been read as a satirical reference to Antiochus, king of the Syrians, for whom the Maccabees had gained their independence. In the process of annexing Samaria, John Hyrcanus also destroyed the Samaritan temple on Mount Gerizim, and so rid the land of cult practices not strictly based on the hegemony of Jerusalem. This illuminates Judith's otherwise very odd statement in 8:18 through 20 that the Jews had successfully rooted out the worship of gods made with hands. Further, the conversion of Achior, though it would find some precedence in ancient Jewish tradition, would be more comprehensible in the light of John Hyrcanus' move to convert the Idumeans to Judaism by force. One could argue that the forced annexation of Samaria and the forced conversion of Idumeans would not lead to such warm relations as are depicted in Judith, but to the Hasmoneans, the annexation and conversion would be seen as liberation, and this is precisely why Judith is at such pains to idealize them. The boldness of Judith's affirmations make most sense in a situation where unity is imposed. The Book of Judith thus idealizes Samaria and Judea together as Israel and does not have, as some scholars have suggested, a hidden Samaritan identity. To be sure, other scholars argue that the author of Judith is secretly opposed to the rule of the Hasmoneans, but the agreements with the Hasmonean rulers far outweigh the possible challenges within the text. Even if Judith were a subversive text within the Hasmonean kingdom, that would still at least date the text in the period that is here proposed.
That would make sense. There are a lot of similarities that they're drawing between these kinds of ideologies.
Yeah.
So on the all right, so we talked about the date, which we would place in the Hasmonean period. I think everyone would place it that way, apparently, from what I'm noticing. Questions of genre have been just as what's the word I'm looking for? Just as messy as the question of historicity.
Mm-hmm. Because it was initially included in the Christian Bible as a historical text, though it's pretty clearly not.
Yeah, like with Martin Luther, right? We just mentioned him before, saying that it was a poem. There are ideas that, the thing is, I guess it could have like this folktale vibe, and it could also it has elements of apocalyptic and eschatological works, but it's really not enough to call it that, I don't think.
It also has similarities with, her character has similarities with two types of characters in Greek novels. In some ways, such as in respect to her beauty, wealth, and piety, she is like the young heroines. In terms of being a self-directed and commanding figure and a widow, she is also like some of the Greek widows. The widows, however, are not generally depicted positively, but are sexually driven, powerful, and sinister, controlling the protagonist's lives. Jerome makes a comparison between Gentile widows and Christian widows that's illuminating. Gentile widows are wont to paint their faces with rouge and white lead, to flaunt in silk dresses, to deck themselves in gleaming jewels, to wear gold necklaces, to hang from their pierced ears the costliest Red Sea pearls, and to reek of musk. Jerome's stereotype is thus similar to that of the Greek novels. It is all the more striking, then, that Judith does all these things as well, albeit in the service of God, and is seen more positively throughout. Another similarity to the Greek novels is the fact that the female protagonist is so much more engaging and active than the male protagonist. This aspect is also found in the genre trait in Greek novels, but is emphasized even more in Judith. Still, there's one important way in which Judith differs from the Greek and Jewish novels: the invulnerability of the heroine. The Greek and Jewish novels all feature a vulnerable heroine, and usually a vulnerable hero as well, but Judith is not buffeted by events. She is more like the male hero of epic.
And as far as the book's purpose goes, so for a long time now, people have been more concentrated on the theological values of Judith than they have been on any historical values, although that used to be flipped. So the note here from Moore: while most scholars of the last 100 years have agreed that the author of Judith was concerned more with theology than with history, and that he did not intend that his account be taken as describing actual events, their agreement ends right there. Some indication of the wide range of opinion on this matter may be gained from the following quotations arranged in chronological order. Now, I'm glad that they have this in chronological order. So let's hear one of the older ones. Let's hear an interpretation of this from 1888. This is from a scholar named Ball.
B-A-A-L?
No. B-A-L-L.
Okay.
Yeah, the other one.
Ball.
Yeah. The author, quote, the author made an attempt to recommend Pharisaic principles by a sort of historical novel. Let's hop, give me a year. Give me a year between 1888 and 1977.
1902.
All right. So this one's a little longer. The chief concern of the writer is with the telling of the story rather than with the painting of a moral, in which the wish to interest takes precedence even of the desire to instruct. The book is well calculated to inspire patriotism and piety, views and doctrines which have nothing to do with the progress of the story are not introduced. Let's see. Give me another year.
1923.
16. Yeah, 1916.
Okay. The main purpose of the book is therefore clearly to inculcate and to forward Pharisaic Judaism, and that's from Osterley. We read one of his translations.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
This just shows you how many different translations we get around to.
Yeah. It's almost like we have a whole bunch of books.
Yeah.
And then one of the more recent ones from, this is just a great name, Craven.
Yeah, Craven is brought up in here too.
Yeah. Judith is, this is from 1977. Judith is a fictional drama in which history, geography, and characterizations serve a narrative purpose. By design, the story teaches readiness for the unexpected.
So Wills goes on at length about the literary aspects.
Okay.
So I'm going to read bits of this, but not the entire thing.
Oh, apparently irony is going to be a big thing in this book.
Yeah, so the literary qualities of Judith are significant, but it's often a challenge to describe the actions of a work of popular as opposed to classical literature. Popular novels have a function to entertain, perhaps to instruct, but are often perceived as falling short of the higher criteria of excellence that have been arrived at in the study of classical literature. Still, it's unfair and ultimately inaccurate to apply the standards of classical literature rigidly to popular literature. The latter will come up short, and the essential nature of such literature and its positive qualities and social function may be missed, just as the moral ideals in Judith were questioned by commentators in the modern period. So also the literary qualities of the book have often been dismissed by those who misperceived its literary genre and function. These criticisms fall into two categories: the disproportionate length of the first part concerning the rise of the military threat to Bethulia, and the rhetorical excess of the whole. So it goes on to say, on the question of the rhetorical excess in general, these were perhaps noted most emphatically by Pfeiffer. The turgid style, the patent exaggerations, the stately pomp and ceremony throughout, unreviled by a sense of humor, give to the book a baroque rather than a classical appearance. It is quite revealing by his lack of sympathy for the genre that he says that the Book of Judith does not have a sense of humor. Quite opposite is the case. In response to these criticisms, it's important to see popular literature in its proper context. It is precisely the goal of the author of Judith to impress the reader with an unrestrained exuberance and to have an immediate impact. The author of Judith makes an art of excess. The descriptions of the troops, the artificial geographical sweep, the pillage and destruction, the gory central scene, all of these serve to keep the reader riveted. This is the same approach that is found in other novelistic works, both Jewish and Greek. It should be noted that the author of Judith did not work with established models of what the novel genre should look like. The novel was a bold experiment, only in the first stages of development. Nonetheless, the author had introduced innovative improvements over the other novels, whereas some of the more primitive novels of this period were characterized by duplicated scenes, such as the additions of Esther, or separate small narratives strung together, such as the additions to Daniel. Judith attains a length that is larger than the other novels of the Apocrypha, and yet maintains a smooth-taut narrative. To be sure, there are two different movements to the story, but there is a logical relationship between them, and the author exercises many literary gifts. In many ways, Judith is the best constructed of the Jewish novels. Now, he goes on to say later, which I think is where we'll find some parallels with Tobit, the hero pattern is a broad and varied phenomenon occurring in all parts of the world and has attracted the attention of scholars who see the possibility of isolating a monomyth, a single narrative structure that is the model of all hero tales worldwide. While this goal may never be attained in detail, it is clear that there are common patterns of the hero narrative and that comparing Judith with some of the reconstructions of cross-cultural patterns could be instructive. The best-known attempt to isolate a single pattern with variations is that of Joseph Campbell. His summary of the typical hero story pattern, and the vast majority of the narratives he cites concern male heroes, is as follows, slightly simplified. The mythological hero, setting forth from his hut or castle, proceeds to the threshold of adventure. There he encounters a shadowy presence that guards the passage. The hero may defeat or consolate his power and go alive into the kingdom of the dark. Beyond the threshold, the hero journeys through a world of unfamiliar yet strangely intimate forces, some of which severely threaten him. When he arrives at the nadir of the mythological world, he undergoes a supreme ordeal and gains his reward. The triumph may be represented as the hero's theft of the boon he came to gain. The final work is that of return. The hero reemerges from the kingdom of dread. The boon that he brings restores the world. The elements of the narrative are very similar to the Book of Judith. The departure of the hero, the crossing of the threshold into a dark region of danger, the trials of the hero and the slaying of a monster, in this case, Holofernes, the stealing of a great boon to humanity, the head of Holofernes, the return of the hero, the re-entry into society by crossing the threshold again, and the restoration of peace. What we have in the case of Judith is a hero narrative cast in a more realistic setting that brings down to earth many of the elements of the story pattern. Further, Campbell's analysis helps us to understand why some of the characters of Judith are so one-dimensional. The literary or theological value of the Book of Judith is not contained in the development of Judith's character or in an analysis of evil as embodied in Holofernes. The complexity that usually makes characters interesting is not present. Judith does not grow as a character and is not mixed of good and evil qualities. It is emphasized that she is wise, virtuous, and capable, but she does not discover anything about herself. She is like the figures of myth, who are likewise often one-dimensional. The hero myth is born fully formed in his heroic traits. The remarkable virtues of this person, according to Campbell, are more predestined than achieved in the course of life. Thus, both the hero and the monster reach their end by destiny. There's very little need to create multidimensional characters. So, Judith will follow pretty closely the standard hero narrative from the monomyth that we're all familiar with. Now, I don't know if you had anything there about biblical parallels, but there are.
I mean, there were the links with Esther, I suppose.
Well, there's a bit more. There are explicit references to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to Simeon. The fact that the main character is a woman naturally attracts our attention to biblical stories that focus on female characters.
Yeah, not for the first 7 chapters.
Yeah, right.
So things like Rebecca, Rahab the prostitute, who bears more than a passing resemblance to Judith, to parts of Judith, rather. It's not that Judith also plays the harlot with Holofernes. Rahab, like Achior, is also non-Israelite who joins Israel, and her speech is very similar to Achior's speech in Judith 5. At several points in the Hebrew Bible, there is an execution of a warrior by a woman who is considered shameful. It was a shameful form of death, such as Abimelech being killed by a woman who drops a millstone on him. And you remember that he's like, I don't want to die by the hands of a woman. Ooh.
Abimelech. Oh no. Okay. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Abimelech. Okay. I was thinking
twice at least.
I was thinking of Absalom. That was the guy I was thinking of.
Right.
He was the guy who like ran into a tree on his horse.
There's also many parallels with Deborah, Judges 4-5, and I'm sure we'll be able to point those out more. When
Deborah was the only female judge, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
There are also similarities with the male warriors and leaders in the Bible. Judith is not only like Deborah, but she is also like the other judges and prophets who arise when God hears the prayers of the people to give the land rest from oppression for a number of years onward. We note, for example, Ehud's killing of Eglon, king of Moab.
Wow, that's that's the quote of the day also. And yeah, Jason, you're right. Lots of Judges references today. It's a very judge-like character. I mean, if you consider the role of the judges in Judges, it's very similar. It's not as overtly divinely ordained, I would say, or at least we're not told that way. I think that's the point that you're supposed to get out of the book, but it's not like as overt about it, because like in Judges you get the whole thing about the election of these people, but in this case it's less about the election and more about the action that's being taken.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one last thing I'll note from this introduction is that non-Jewish traditions can also be postulated that are in many cases just as close as the biblical. The Ugaritic epic of Akkad, for example, tells the story of the woman Paghat, who, enraged over the death of her brother Akkad, avenges him by inebriating his murder and slaying him while he is on his bed.
Oh.
The use of written text in the composition of another written text does not preclude the use also of motifs and themes from oral traditions. But what's important here is that Judith is not just the sum total of the myriad motifs that it appears to borrow, now strung together. It uses these many building blocks and yet still reflects a single vision of a talented author who communicates the exuberance of Judith's freedom in a new genre, the novel.
All right. I mean, honestly, I think we're ready to get into the readings. Shall we?
Yeah. Sounds...
What you got going on there?
I got a text.
A text?
Yeah.
Man, you're very popular.
I am the most popular. Anyways, if you're enjoying our stream so far, since we've just introduced Judith, you can go ahead and share that with your friends, family, neighbors, etc. Before we actually get into the text proper.
Yeah, the good old reading of these. So of course the text itself can, like I said, Judith doesn't even pop up until later, right?
Yeah.
So
halfway through the book.
Right. So we can usually divide it up into like the historical context and the actual story of Judith. So that's how most commentary is divided up. They have better names. Actually, no, maybe they have worse names. You tell me. So, like part 1, Nebuchadnezzar threatens the West and Israel. And then part 2, Judith arises to rescue her people. I don't know. They're about on the same level.
Yeah. There's a number of pictures in here. Like
Some level 1 shit here.
many paintings and statues of Judith holding this head.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot. In fact, when I was trying to find any background for this, like almost every single thing that I came across was some depiction of Judith cutting off someone's head. This is not it because we're not there yet. So otherwise it'd be like maybe 4 or 5 different iterations of the same scene as a background if we did that. So I did not want to do that.
Also noteworthy, this book, it points out at the beginning of each chapter, or at the beginning of each section, rather, because it doesn't necessarily break it down chapter by chapter.
Yeah, same with this one.
It points out that the Vulgate has a different numbering for the verses.
Yes, I think it's the exact same verses themselves, but just differently numbered.
Yeah, so for example, chapter 1 here, which I'm just checking to see. Yeah, it's 16 verses long in here. The Vulgate has it as 12 verses long. So without further ado, let's hop into Judith.
Yeah, and we would have a long commentary on this first part, but we're not going to because we already had that.
There might be a little bit of commentary.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like on the long historical, like these things don't work. The 2 big blunders. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few comments. I think the textual notes will probably be a little more interesting since we've already covered.
Yeah.
Basically, the essence of the commentary on this first chapter. Anyways, chapter 1. It was the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled over the Assyrians from his capital Nineveh, that Arphaxad was ruling over the Medes from Ecbatana. Arphaxad had surrounded Ecbatana with walls of hewn stones, 4.5 feet thick and 9 feet long, and the walls he had made 105 feet high and 75 feet wide.
Those were pretty tall for those days.
Yeah.
I think.
So the next couple verses are in parentheses, so I'm going to finish those and then flip to this commentary.
Okay.
But feel free to hop in with whatever commentary you have from either of those 2 books. At its gates, he had placed towers 150 feet high, with foundations 90 feet thick. He had designed its gates, which were 105 feet high and 60 feet wide, to allow his army of mighty men to parade forth with his infantry in full formation. And that's the end of the parentheses section.
So this is it's noted to be a very cinematic kind of feel. Like everything is enormous and it's glorious. So the note here. Ecbatana figures historically and accurately in... Okay, so I mentioned a couple of places that Ecbatana pops up. We've already covered both of them. Thus, the city is part of the eastern home of diaspora Jews and would have been known would have been a known entity to the audience. Perhaps more for the literary technique here is the historian Polybius's remark that exaggerated descriptions of the palace, as here in Judith, were common in sensationalist histories. The author has, in just a few lines, plunged plunged us into a dramatic world of the clash of great nations. At this point, we might compare a similar effect achieved in a very different way in the additions to Esther, which we did cover when we covered Esther. Whereas the Masoretic text, Esther, began as a court narrative with a description of the pomp and splendor of the great Persian palace. The additions begin by recounting a dream that came to Mordecai. So noises and confusion, thunder and earthquake, tumult on the earth. Then 2 great dragons came forward, both ready to fight, and they roared terribly. At their roaring, every nation prepared for war to fight against the righteous nation. And that's the addition to Esther. Yeah, that is one of the additions to Esther, I should say.
So I want to comment on these walls and towers here.
Okay. Are they big?
Well, of course they're big.
Yeah.
But although scholars have often compared the walls of Ecbatana with those of other great cities, such as Babylon or Nineveh, to make such comparisons is really to miss the author's point. While Ecbatana's grandeur and massiveness is attested to an almost superhuman power of Nebuchadnezzar, who was able to conquer such a city, his army was still unable to take insignificant Bethulia, a town protected only by God of Israel. All the prodigious dimensions of verses 2 through 4 are totally fictitious. The invention of the author to evoke an atmosphere of grandeur. To date, no such protective walls have been found at Ecbatana, although in all fairness, it must be noted that because the modern city of Hamadan now covers it, Ecbatana has not been scientifically excavated by archaeologists. On the other hand, other great Persian cities, such as Persepolis, have been excavated thoroughly, and no such protective walls have been found there either.
So that commentary was written a very long time ago. I'm actually going to look up if they have done any kind of digs
All right.
on Ecbatana.
While you're looking that up, for these towers that were 150 feet high, the number of these wall towers is not mentioned by the author, but according to Diodorus Siculus, a Greek historian of the 1st century BC, Nineveh had 1,500 such towers, each of them 200 feet high.
That's a lot.
Dang.
That's a lot of big numbers. Also, all right, so Ecbatana was first actually excavated in 1913. This is straight from Wikipedia. I just looked this up. I wanted to know if they did any excavations. So excavations have been limited due to the modern town covering most of the ancient city, the ancient site. In 1969, the Ministry of Culture and Art began buying property on the tell in support of archaeology, though excavation did not begin until 1983. When was that book written?
If
you can find that,
was written. It says on the title that it's a new commentary.
Oh, right.
1985.
Okay, so apparently it had already
Internet.
started.
Maybe they wouldn't know about that.
I mean, no, they would have known if they were in the circle.
Well,
they would
the
have known.
essential thing to it is that there's a town on top of where this was.
Right. By 2007, 12 seasons of excavation had occurred. The work on the tell is ongoing. Okay, so they're still excavating.
Okay, let's continue. In that year, King Nebuchadnezzar went to war against King Arphaxad in the Great Plain. This plain is on the borders of the Ragas. And it's noted here that this is the place where Arphaxad was killed.
Also, wasn't that place mentioned in Tobit?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says the city is mentioned frequently in the Book of Tobit.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of Ragau, the Syriac has Dura, which may represent in part the Syrian translator's misreading of a Hebrew resh for a Daleth. So, there rallied to him all the inhabitants of the highlands, all those living along the Euphrates, the Tigris, and the Hydaspes, and in the plains, King Arioch of the Elamaeans. Thus, many nations had mustered to join the forces of the Chelodites.
Yeah, so this is this global focus, because they're listing a whole bunch of places everywhere. So the fortunes of the Jews are thus seen in an international context and in the company of the major nations of the world. This global focus was also known to the prophets, at least to the later ones, right? And I guess Amos too. That one's older, but we'll get more into Amos later.
Yeah. So this King Arioch of the Elamians, not only can this king not be identified, but the phrase mentioning him is totally corrupt. A fact glossed over by most modern translations. According to Polybius, Elamea was a Persian district. On the name, as it appears in Genesis 14:1 and 9, there's some other commentary he references. But yeah, maybe you want to look at that.
Genesis 14:1 and 9?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And on the Cheladites, since neither the Septuagint nor the ancient versions offer a name which is otherwise known, Yuan Chelod, literally sons of Chelod, is either another name for the Assyrians or a corruption of Chaldeans, or least likely another group which joined the Assyrians.
So 14:1, and it happened in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar. Oh man, I remember saying this name poorly. Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. So yeah, they were going to war against some other nations. Do you remember what word he was looking at? Something about Elam, right?
Was that King Arioch of the Elamans?
Okay, so I'm guessing he was talking about Elam there. That's just a guess. There's not really any commentary on that though. On Elam. Mm-hmm. All right. Come on, Alter, letting us down.
Right. Also, this other river that's mentioned by the Tigris and Euphrates.
Yeah.
The river of this name is actually located in far distant India.
Oh.
Ancient versions offer quite varied readings, and many scholars think that the river intended was actually the 200-mile-long Choaspes, which flows west of Susa into the Tigris-Euphrates, and is mentioned in Strabo in connection with the Euleus, a river near Susa.
Right. And yeah, as long as we remember that this author, he gets geography right when it comes to stuff that's nearby him. But this stuff is not actually that nearby him, especially if you consider the one in India.
Right. Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, also contacted all the inhabitants of Persia and all those living in the west, those living in Cilicia and Damascus, Lebanon, and anti-Lebanon. Anti-Lebanon. That's interesting. Huh. And all those living along the coast.
Sorry, what verse is anti-Lebanon?
Verse 7.
Okay.
See if Eerdman has anything to say about that.
No, I don't think it does. I looked over the first part, and it's basically none of it. It basically only covers the reign of Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh yeah. It doesn't mention anti-Lebanon in here.
I want to know what that
Not
is.
in here either.
Wow. So whatever anti-Lebanon is, that's in there.
I didn't know there was a place called Anti-Lebanon. Show me. Yeah, just straight up anti-Lebanon. Anti-Lebanon.
Yeah. Those among the peoples of Carmel and Gilead, and those in Upper Galilee, and the great valley of Esdraelon, all those in Samaria and its towns, and beyond the Jordan as far as Jerusalem, Bethane, Chelis, Kadesh, and the brook of Egypt, Tahpanhes, Ramses, and all the land of Goshen. You know, maybe there was there's a map, right? Where was it?
Yeah, they're kind of throughout.
Here's a map. Maybe they have anti-Lebanon in here.
Anti-Lebanon would have been a country, right? So it would be on a different page. Yeah. Let's know if you can find anti-Lebanon on that.
Okay. So there's Mount Lebanon, and then to the east of Mount Lebanon is the anti-Lebanon mountains.
Okay.
So it's just mountains near the mountains.
It's like the Arctic and the Antarctic.
Yeah.
But immediately next to each other.
Which is...
You might as well call it... Look at this shit. Lebanon, anti-Lebanon.
Mount Lebanon.
Well, Mount Lebanon, yeah. So
no, but they have all those. That's nuts.
They're right next to each other. Might as well just call it Lebanon.
Right? Okay. I don't really have any more commentary on all those nations.
Okay. Beyond Tanis and Memphis and all those living in Egypt and as far away as the borders of Ethiopia. But all those living in that entire area ignored the call of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, and would not join him in the campaign. For they did not fear him, but regarded him as an ordinary man. Therefore, they sent his envoys away, empty-handed and mortified.
Yeah, you can definitely see I can see the link here to Esther, because it's here's this guy who thinks he's all great and whatnot, and no one's like, yeah, whatever, dude, just like you're whatever, you got a crown on your head, you're the king or something, but piss off.
Yeah.
And he's like, where are you going? What are you doing?
Apparently, some translations mistakenly rephrase this as they thought he had no chance of winning the war.
Oh.
Nebuchadnezzar was so incensed at this entire region that he swore by his throne and kingdom that he would get revenge on all the territories of Cilicia, Damascus, and Syria, and would put to the sword all those living in the land of Moab, the Ammonites, all Judea, and all those living in Egypt, as far as the shores of the two seas.
So, part of the important cultural background of the Book of Judith is the ancient Mediterranean concept of honor and shame. In ancient cultures, honor and shame were important and very public aspects of a person's or a nation's standing.
And still to this day in many parts of the world.
Yes, although this author also says, quite different from our modern, more internalized values of self-esteem and guilt. We still have those other things, though. Honor and shame, we still have those. Symbols of honor and shame and ritual ways of honoring or shaming another person are interwoven into the biblical texts, but modern readers are apt to disregard these elements as mere externals. What? Do they?
I guess.
I don't know. Honor and shame are certainly at issue here and will be a constant in this book.
So you're saying that honor and shame are only externals by modern standing?
Shame is literally a basic emotion.
Right.
I was like, yeah, I don't know.
In this, these scholars, they're so detached from reality.
They are kind of detached. Let's be honest here. They're detached sometimes.
Yeah.
They don't have their finger on the pulse.
Yeah. In the 17th year, he marshaled his forces against King Arphaxad, and in this battle he defeated him, routing Arphaxad's entire army and all his cavalry and chariots. He occupied his towns and then turned to Ecbatana, subduing its towers and looting its bazaars, thereby reducing its magnificence to a mockery. He caught Arphaxad in the mountains of Rages and riddled him with his javelins, thus making an end of him once and for all. Then he returned with his spoils to Nineveh. He and his entire motley crew, an enormous horde of soldiers. There he and his army recuperated and feasted for 4 whole months.
Yep.
Which is literally, it says 120 days.
Okay.
Check Esther 1:4, where Xerxes celebrated at Susa for half a year.
Okay.
I want to note from the commentary here a couple of things.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. According to Craven, activities on mountaintops are undeniable importance in the Book of Judith. Nebuchadnezzar destroys his enemy Arphaxad in the mountains. Holofernes, too, moves against his enemies in the hills and hilltop cities, continually narrowing the scene of combat to a specific hill on which the town of Bethulia is built. The interweaving of this imagery with the specific cultic notes about the destruction of places of worship, in spite of the prior surrender of these people, and the explicit fear of the people of Israel for their temple in Jerusalem, transforms concern to concern over religious survival. This concatenation of the scenes of conflict gradually builds to the climactic confrontation on the Israelite mountaintop city of Bethulia.
Maybe this is kind of like, okay, so if you remember the difference between First and Second Maccabees, like the essential ideological difference.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them was more
Tactical.
Well, no. One of them was more secular in that what they were looking for was kind of like personal liberties, right? And then the other one was about religious freedom.
Right, and it was much more into like the high priest and all
exactly.
That. Now,
So,
both of them detail the war crimes committed by Judah Maccabee.
Absolutely. Although I would point out here that maybe this is kind of like along, because it's written in the same period, maybe this is kind of the same feeling, but you ramp up the shame a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm guessing, because in Maccabees, it wasn't really about the shame that like Antiochus was feeling or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that, whichever dude they were up against was feeling. But this book, considering the amount of shame that Nebuchadnezzar has already felt and the amount of shame that I believe Esther's victim will feel. Sorry, not Esther's. Judith's victim will feel.
Yeah.
Getting all these books mixed up.
Holofernes.
Yeah. So maybe it's just that ramped up a little bit.
Maybe. It also notes here, this is no longer Craven. In other words, all mountaintop activities in Judith are strictly symbolic, having no independent historicity, just as it was appropriate that the representatives of Yahweh and Baal contend for Israel's loyalty on top of Mount Carmel, 1 Kings 18, 17 through 46. So in Judith, the question of who is the Lord of all the earth had to be fought in high places. So this is not only a reference to geographical areas, but it is a reference to the motif of the high places. And that is the end of chapter 1. And chapter 2, it's broken up into two sections here. The second one is like a couple pages.
I think that might be similar in here. Yes, it is also similar in here. So here you go.
If you're enjoying the stream so far, give us a like, comment, subscribe, do all of the things that you would normally do, and the things that you would not normally do.
Do everything. Hurry up.
So I mean, we'll talk about this first one. So unless you have some commentary for the chapter, then we can hop into it.
So I'll point out this is the second scene.
Yeah. Because we just ended off with the other guy dying.
Yeah. And the third scene goes from 2:14 through 7:32.
Mm-hmm.
So the second scene is the shortest in this first half of the book.
Come on. Lawrence gets a short reading again?
Well, no, it's not just the...
No, it's not just
No, he gets a short scene and then part of another scene.
Yeah.
So in this scene, Nebuchadnezzar is still at center stage. He summons his officers and nobles and commissions his second in command, Holofernes, to implement his threat of vengeance. So this is where we are meeting the actual villain of the story.
Ooh, I love the villain of the story. All right. Then, in the 18th year of the 22nd... Wait, what? Sorry, okay, I misread that. Because that would not have made sense the way I was reading it. So, in the 18th year, on the 22nd day of the first month, the decision was made in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, which again, king of the Babylonians, to take revenge on the whole region, just as he had promised. So there is quite some stuff on this verse here.
Yeah, the term "the whole region" is used 8 times in the first 2 chapters.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no. So on 18th year, this is the year after Arphaxad's defeat, during which period Nebuchadnezzar would have had time to nurse his desire for revenge. I don't know. He seemed to have quite a lot of revenge stored up in him. Mm-hmm. Because the Vulgate... Oh, here's actually something very interesting. So because the Vulgate lacks 113 through 16... So some of the verses that we were ending off at in the last chapter, it dates this punitive campaign to Nebuchadnezzar's 13th year. Those scholars who see this campaign of Nebuchadnezzar as being actually that of Ashurbanipal regard it as Ashurbanipal's reaction in 652 BC, when at the instigation of his brother, oh boy, this name. You're going to love this name, guys.
Love this name?
Yes, it's Shamash-shumukin.
Shamash-shumukin?
Yes.
I love that name.
My good friend, Shamash-shumukin.
Yep. By his brother, or of his brother Shamash-shumukin, nations revolted against him throughout the empire, including Babylon, Elam, Syria, and Judah. That revolt was not quelled until after 640 BCE. On the other hand, Subugu, I think that's that's another person, another ancient person. No, never mind. That's not an ancient person. That's a person that was living at the time. He's another scholar, I guess. Saw here one of the campaigns of Artaxerxes III, Arcus, possibly that of 345 BCE.
Now we have Arcus.
Yeah.
Yeah, crap.
Yeah. We don't just have Antiochus anymore.
Yeah,
and we also have Jordan and Anti-Jordan.
Yeah. No, it was wasn't it Assyria?
Yeah. That was the mountain.
Jordan and Anti-Jordan, which
No,
we made a point
it wasn't
of saying in the first chapter. Yes. You can flip back to it if you want.
Was it Jordan?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay.
Wow,
I swear it
your
was a different
memory
place.
is fucking terrible.
I could swear it was a different
Actually,
place.
all of our short-term memories aren't great, but our long-term memories are pretty good. It's weird.
They named a number of places.
I mean, they did name a number of places. Yeah.
And
The one that you pointed out to me is the one that I'm thinking of.
The one that I pointed out on the map was Jordan and Anti-Jordan. Mount Jordan and Mount Anti-Jordan.
Really?
Yes.
Was it? Okay. I'll go with that.
You can literally flip back
to
it, and it will say Anti-Jordan. You made a whole big deal about it.
Was it Jordan, though? I knew it was something and anti-something. Lebanon.
Not Jordan.
Gotcha.
Ugh. It was not Syria.
It wasn't Syria.
Whatever.
Whatever. We were both wrong.
Fucking Lebanon.
So, more likely, however, the ancient author, with no intention of deceiving, simply preferred to invent for his account those trappings that usually accompany a historical tale.
Okay. So, why don't you continue on?
Okay. Summoning all his ministers and nobles, he presented them with his secret strategy. Ooh. Yeah, and with his own lips, he reviewed for them the full insult of that entire region because they weren't doing his bidding. Mm-hmm. so that they resolved to destroy everyone who had not answered his appeal.
So the summoning of all of Nebuchadnezzar's ministers and nobles and the decision that everyone who had not obeyed his command should be destroyed are similar to certain parts of Daniel 1 through 6. In the case of Daniel 1 through 4, it's also Nebuchadnezzar who is the offending king. Daniel was evidently one of the influences on the Book of Judith.
After he had perfected his plan, Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, summoned Holofernes, the general in command of his armies and second in command to himself, and said to him, "Thus says the great king, Lord of the whole world."
So I want to point out.
I wanted there to be a behold there.
Me too.
I want to point out another indication that we're not in the realm of history, but in that of imaginative literature, is the repeated characterization of Nebuchadnezzar as Lord. This motif is introduced here for the first time, but will be built on later in the narrative until it takes on ironic and even comic dimensions in chapters 11 through 13.
They're clearly building an anti-God character here.
Yeah, the word Lord in Greek, you can read that.
Kurios.
Would have multiple uses, always denoting the clear superior and hierarchical relation. For example, ruler as opposed to subject, master as opposed to slave, husband as opposed to wife, or in the case of gods, Lord of heaven, and so on. As such, it was adopted by Greek-speaking Jews as the standard word to translate the divine name Yahweh. Thus, in Judith, we find the intentional double meaning of Lord as God and Lord as earthly superior. Only the arrogant and deluded Holofernes will mistake Judith's reference to the divine Lord for references to himself and Nebuchadnezzar as earthly lords.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah, thus says the great king, Lord of the whole world, leave our presence and take with you experienced soldiers, as many as 120,000 infantry and 12,000 cavalry, and march out against all the region to the west, for they ignored my call. Tell them to prepare for me earth and water, because in my rage I am about to come upon them, and I will cover every square inch of land with the feet of my army, and I will let them be looted by my troops.
So earth and water were typical signs of submission demanded by Persian, not Assyrian or Babylonian kings.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, that gives you more indication as to the date there.
Yeah.
Yeah, as noted here, yeah, Persian, not an Assyrian or Babylonian token of submission. This detail is just one more of the Persian elements in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good stuff. This is the kind of things, or these are the kind of things that people aren't really looking at usually. Like if they read this with like some element of faith or something, they're usually not reading for something like that.
Right.
Like that's
even slightly.
Yeah, that's something you got to really know the subject for, or really go out of your way to research that and then figure out where it came from. So like the first person to figure that out, I'm sure they were like, unless they noticed it because they had already been reading like Persian things.
No, they were like, egads, I recognize that phraseology.
Right.
By Jove.
So unless it was like that, that means they actually went out of their way to look up references like that in other in ancient literature, and then they were like, "Man, this is really boring." But then they got to an answer eventually. Okay, let's continue.
Yeah.
So, and I will let them be looted by my troops. Their wounded will fill their ravines and gullies.
That's a lot of dead.
Yes, every river will be filled to overflowing with their corpses. I will send them away as captives to the ends of the whole world. As for you, go and occupy all their territory for me in advance. If they surrender to you, hold them for me until the time comes for me to punish them. But on the rebellious, show no mercy. Let them be slaughtered and looted throughout your territory. For as surely as I and my powerful kingdom live, I have spoken. I will accomplish these things by my own hand. As for you, don't neglect a single one of your Lord's commands, but execute them fully, just as instructed, and don't delay in doing it.
So, a few things here. First, I want to point out about the time that's made mention of at the beginning of this chapter.
Yeah, the 18th year.
The 18th year. This alludes to the year 587 BC, when Jerusalem fell for the first time to King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon.
We did cover this earlier.
Yes. So that is an interesting bit. But in addition to that, we get some divine language here, right?
Yeah, like all the stuff about the Lord. And now we're okay. So here's some things that I noticed. So of course the introduction with like, "Thus says the great King, Lord of the whole world," and then it goes on to have this really exaggerated death imagery, and then it goes even further about the whole thing about punishment. Actually, struck me as very, I guess I could call it Yoistic in a sense,
right?
That this is the similar to the language that Yahweh uses in the prophets.
Oh, this earth and water thing was according to Herodotus.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
Pretty old.
First historian.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that one as well with the rebellious being shown no mercy and like a time of judgment that's coming upon people. And then at the end there, like, don't neglect a single one of your Lord's commands. Like that, like all those things just struck me as very like, okay, they're straight up making an anti-God character.
Right. It says the divine pretensions of Nebuchadnezzar are here not stated explicitly. He does not require worship as a god, even though Holofernes will require this for him at 3:8. However, to the Jewish audiences, his words here will reverberate as sentences associated with God. Further, Nebuchadnezzar's statement that he will accomplish this by his own hand sets up contrast with Judith's later statement that God will deliver the Jews through her hand. Although, strictly speaking, it is Holofernes who takes on the traits of a blustery tyrant, demanding worship for Nebuchadnezzar as a god, the tradition of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel would probably have made this association automatic.
Yeah, so like it notes here, Nebuchadnezzar is not the villain in Judith, Holofernes is.
Yes.
But they're definitely painting Nebuchadnezzar in a really bad light, which makes sense considering all of the Bible.
Yeah, generally you don't hear people praising Nebuchadnezzar.
Right.
Much.
All right, continuing on here. This is still chapter 2, but it is a different section. After withdrawing from his lord's presence, Holofernes summoned all the marshals, generals, and officers of the Assyrian army and mustered picked men by divisions, as his lord had instructed him, 120,000 infantry and 12,000 mounted bowmen. He organized them as a great army. As a great army is marshaled. He also took an enormous number of camels, asses, and mules for carrying their baggage, and innumerable sheep, oxen, and goats for their food, as well as ample rations for every man, and a generous amount of gold and silver from the royal palace.
So this is just meant to convey the enormity of his forces.
Yeah. He then set out on his campaign, he and his entire army, to go ahead of King Nebuchadnezzar and to smother the whole western region with their chariots, cavalry, and picked infantry. Along with them, there went out a motley crowd like locusts, like the dust of the earth, countless because of their number. So a very large crowd came with them.
Yeah. What verse did you just finish?
That was verse 20.
All right. This description of the livestock and tents has a definite role in Judges 6, and the devastation of the livestock is like that of locusts. In Judith, the role of these images does not make as much sense on the realistic level, but is exaggerated and repeated, probably for comic effect. Aside from this literary effect, one may wonder if the size of the Assyrian army is to be contrasted to what the author's time was the proud tradition of the Maccabees, who had fought a guerrilla campaign using small bands of troops against the vast armies of the Seleucid kings. The Maccabees, it's also to be noted, between sorties, hid in the mountains like those near Judith's village.
Yeah, aside from noting the imagery, they got nothing on the this section there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, we get it, locusts. Whoa, that's novel for the Bible. They set out from Nineveh on a 3-day march to the plain of Bechteleth, and they encamped opposite Bechteleth near the mountain north of Upper Cilicia. From there, Holofernes advanced into the highlands with his whole army, infantry, cavalry, and chariots. He cut his way through Put and Lud and plundered all the Rassites, and Ishmaelites living on the edge of the desert south of Chelion. Then, crossing the Euphrates and proceeding through Mesopotamia, he razed all the walled towns along Wadi Abron, which is a valley.
Let me know when you finish
river,
verse 27.
As far as the sea. He occupied the territory of Cilicia and slaughtered all who resisted him. So he's just knocking these down one by one.
Yeah.
Then he came to the southern borders of Japheth, facing Arabia. Surrounding all the Midianites, he set their tents on fire and plundered their sheepfolds.
Sounds like Maccabee.
A little bit, yeah. Descending upon the plain of Damascus during the wheat harvest, he set fire to all their fields, destroyed their flocks and herds, sacked their towns, stripped their plains, and put all their young men to the sword. That's verse 27.
So the ironic tone already noted continues as the geographical particulars are indicated. The march described in 21 through 27 includes real and imaginary places, unlikely routes, and the impossible image of Holofernes' massive army and its ragtag followers marching from
Ragtag.
Yeah,
Love it.
marching from Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, through at least 300 miles of terrain to the plain of Bechteleth, an unidentified site north of Upper Cilicia in southeastern Asia Minor. The subjugation and devastation of large parts of the western region are briefly but vividly described. There is no mention of any form of resistance. Whereas earlier the western region had treated the envoys of Nebuchadnezzar with contempt, his envoy Holofernes now evokes fear, dread, and terror. Having dismissed the envoys of Nebuchadnezzar, they then will send their own envoys to Holofernes for peace.
All right, let's continue.
Yep.
So fear and dread of him possessed those living along the seacoast, those in Sidon and Tyre, those living in Sur and Okina, and all those living in Gemnia. Those living in Azotus and Ascalon were also terrified of him. So more cities coming up.
Yeah, so fear and dread fall on the people here. In 15:2, Judith will cause dread and fear to fall on the Assyrians. In the tradition of the Exodus, Exodus 15:15 through 16, and in Rahab's recounting of it, Joshua 2:9, the nations tremble in fear at God's mighty acts. And furthermore, it says about these cities,
I got a lot of notes about these cities too.
The list of 7 cities is intriguing. Moore notes that 7 is a number signifying completeness in biblical literature.
That's this person. Okay. So I'm going to not read that paragraph.
Okay. And perhaps the number is more significant than the names of the cities. 5 of the cities were famous and well known to Judeans: Sidon and Tyre, Azotus or Ashdod, and Ascalon or Ashkelon. Sur and Osina are unknown. The known cities would have been important centers of competition with Judea. When John Hyrcanus I, 134 through 104 BCE, expanded his kingdom, Azotus and Jamnia came under Hasmonean control, while Sidon, Tyre, and Ascalon remained independent. Moore also raises, but wisely dismisses, the theory that since Gaza is missing from the list, Judith must have been written after Alexander Jannaeus destroyed the city in 96 BCE. The evidence of the text simply cannot be pressed to such specific conclusions.
So, I mean, honestly, that mentioned more of this. That mentioned a good amount of stuff I was going to mention about how important some of these cities were. Although one of the notes here for Sur and Okina, unfortunately, both the sites are unknown, probably because of corruption in the text. Sur may be a corruption of Dora, which in Greek, Dora is a word for bedroom.
Oh,
yes.
Wonderful.
I don't know why that matters. But either way, it's a seaport town about 15 miles south of Mount Carmel. But more likely, Sur is a datography. For example, the Hebrew Sawer, Tyre, was read pretty much almost exactly the same, which was transliterated into Greek as Sur. In any event, Vaticanus's that's the manuscript, by the way, Codex Vaticanus. Assyria cannot be correct. Okay, so Codex Vaticanus has Assyria there.
All right.
And I think that's actually the end of the chapter.
Hey, if you're enjoying the stream so far, give us a like, comment, subscribe, share it with all your friends, family, neighbors, invading armies, etc.
That's right. We always forget to share with the invading armies.
Yeah.
So we gotta be more inclusive, guys. Come on.
Also, maybe the defending army?
Starts right here.
They lost.
And here's this commentary. Okay. Chapter 3.
There is a stark contrast between the former haughtiness and smugness of the peoples of the seacoast toward Nebuchadnezzar's messengers in 111 and their abject and total surrender here. Well, really, he just went from town to town, destroyed everything.
So this
I'm
chapter
so surprised.
is pretty short. Pretty short. It's only 10 verses.
Well,
and yeah, that is the whole chapter.
that's the whole chapter.
Shiver
All
your
right,
timbers.
great. I just have to make sure.
So I finally get a short one. Woo! Yeah. Chapter 3. Therefore, they sent him envoys to sue for peace and say, "We, the servants of the great king Nebuchadnezzar, lie prostrate before you. Treat us as you please. Our buildings, all our land, every wheat field, the flocks and herds, all the sheepfolds of our encampments, they are yours. Treat them as seems best to you. Our towns and their inhabitants are your slaves. Come and treat them as you see fit."
Well,
Yeah, that is intense.
that's also reminiscent of something. To treat them as you see fit.
As is good in your eyes. This expression, and treat us as you please, as well as treat them as best seems to you, are more than just literary variations designed to avoid boredom for the reader. Actually, they represent the envoy's skillful use of psychology, appealing as they do to Holofernes' conscious and unconscious needs, namely, to his emotions, his prudence, and his sense of justice. Although the overall effect of verses 2 through 4 is to create an image of terrified groveling, the envoys shrewdly present their case, appealing to various criteria by which Holofernes might judge it. It doesn't note specific parallels with any other things. I am almost certain that we've seen the same language.
Yeah, definitely have.
Yeah. After the envoys had come and reported to Holofernes this message, he went down with his army to the coast, stationed garrisons in the walled towns, and took choice men from them as auxiliaries. So this is, it's a, strategic move by him. It's like kind of Alexandrian, really.
Bolster your forces.
What verse are you at?
That was verse 6.
Okay.
I'm on verse 7 now.
Right.
These people and all those in the surrounding countryside welcomed him with garlands and dancing and tambourines. So they're really throwing a celebration here.
Yeah, it's kind of very Davidic in the sense of like remember when they were dancing? Remember when David was dancing? And that was a problem because like didn't he like show his dick or something? I think that's what happened.
Yeah, and then his wife was all mad at him.
Yeah. But he was like dancing in front of the on the procession with the ark, I think.
Mm-hmm. It says here the garlands.
Prince Ali, fabulous.
Yeah. We don't want to get copyright strike.
Oh yeah.
So for the garlands, this is literally crowns, presumably of leaves and or flowers. See Wisdom of Solomon 2:8. Such wreaths.
Just finished that.
Yeah. Such wreaths belong to the Hellenistic period, not the Persian. Compare 1630 of Jubilees, a pseudepigraphal work of the Greek period, where crowns are mentioned in connection with the Jewish festival of booths.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so do I. Anyways, yet he demolished all their sanctuaries and cut down all their sacred poles. It was granted to him to destroy all the gods of the areas so that all the nations should worship Nebuchadnezzar alone, that every dialect and tribe should call upon him as God.
Wait, hold on. So, let me get this straight. I just want to get an understanding of what's right and what's wrong here. So, biblically speaking, the problem that the Israelite kings had was that they didn't tear down the high places. And then that included stuff like Asherah poles.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
One of them, I actually think
literally
one of them did, right? Josiah
it's woods
did.
or groves.
Yeah, those would be I think those would be a reference to the poles then, wouldn't there? Yeah. So Holofernes institutes a policy of destroying the shrines and sacred groves of the conquered peoples, presumably to show that the Jerusalem temple would be destroyed as well. Sacred groves probably refers to the somewhat vague references in the Hebrew Bible to the wooden poles used in the worship of the goddess Asherah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It says that in the Hebrew Bible, for an Israelite king to tear down pagan shrines and Asherah was quite commendable. But the author had no intention of saying anything to Holofernes' credit. Rather, he had Holofernes do these things so that the Israelites might know exactly what they could expect from Holofernes. His was not just a political or military threat, but a terrible religious menace, namely the disruption of the worship and service of the one true God in favor of a human deity.
Okay, so it's like he's doing the right thing, but for the wrong reason.
Right.
It's like you can't destroy those poles for you. They have to be destroyed for me.
Yeah. Last two verses here. Then he advanced towards Esdraelon, near Dothan, which is opposite the great ridge of Judea. He encamped between Geba and Scythopolis and stayed there a full month as to collect all the supplies for his army.
So the plain of Esdraelon, the Greek form of Jezreel, lies between the hills of Galilee to the north and those of Samaria and Judea to the south. That's about it. Just needed the note on that. So it's Jezreel, basically.
Yeah. And that's the end of the reading for today.
Yeah, really not much to it. We got some context. We got Nebuchadnezzar being all mad And then he's like, hey, Holofernes, go do this thing for me. And Holofernes is like, you got it, boss. So yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. So if you enjoyed the stream today, give us a like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, family, neighbors. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Those are free. But if you want to support us, we have a Patreon.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, you can be on this show once a month for $50 a month.
You could even win a T-shirt because we do monthly T-shirt giveaways.
For $10 a month.
That's crazy.
And for $1 a month, you can get access to all of our scripted videos, video scripts, before the video even comes out.
Yeah, and any behind-the-scenes stuff that we may be posting, like that'll be there as well.
Yeah, and, you know, if you don't want to enter into a giveaway and you just want to buy a T-shirt, then Chris can pin a piece of merchandise. You can go onto our Teespring.
Yeah, in fact, how about, let's see, one of the newer ones. What do we have? Meaningless. I like that one. I like the completely meaningless one.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that one a lot.
Kohelet.
Yeah.
For you Ecclesiastes fans. Anyways, we also have a donation drive.
Yeah, which we are getting. We're getting kind of close there.
Yeah, and once we hit $666 in donations, we'll be getting a thetan meter, and we'll see who the most clear is. We'll tell you all about the thetan meter and about Scientology.
Yeah, and I think that'll be a fun one.
Yep.
With thetan meters and Scientology.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's basically all the shilling.
Are we going to be targeted?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
No, not like we're already going to be targeted.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right. Either way, that's the show. That's all the shilling out of the way. Facebook and Twitter are free. Wish list? Did we talk about the wish list?
Oh, yeah, the Amazon wish list. Tons of books on there. Add to this table. Help us help you to learn all about all kinds of different things.
Yeah, lots of fantastic books on there that can help us give you more information.
Yep.
That's the whole point of that.
Yeah. And so I think without further ado,
we will see you on Sunday.
And also next Friday.
We're